Hello and welcome. This is part of a series of candidate forums that we're co-sponsoring with candidates for Boise School Board. My name is Kevin Richert. I'm a reporter with Idaho EdNews, and we're pleased to be partnering with the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce for these 4 virtual forums with candidates for Boise School Board. The candidates you're going to hear from in this forum are the 3 candidates in race number 2. This is a 4-year term. Top vote getter gets elected. You'll be hearing from Andy Hawes, Neil Mercer, and Matthew Shapiro. I'm going to begin with letting the candidates do kind of an introduction. And Andy, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Neil and Matthew. Give us a little bit of an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how your background informs your candidacy for school board.
Great, thank you, and thanks for hosting this. Again, my name is Andy Hawes. I'm a 5th-generation Boisean and grew up in Boise, and I'm a proud product of the Boise School District, Hawthorne Ace Junior High and Boise High School graduate, and had the pleasure of raising 2 kids through the Boise School District, and got one graduated, and actually one that will be a senior. Spent my entire life here, and I've always been a longtime supporter of the Boise School District. In the 1990s, I led the charge with some citizens to advocate for the renovation of Boise High School, and the Boise School Board was deciding whether or not to renovate Boise High or build a new one. So through that experience, and then throughout my life, I've been a big supporter of the Boise School District. I've volunteered. I was a head coach for Boise High School soccer. And then, of course, as my daughters went through the school system, Longfellow, then North, and then Boise, put in a lot of volunteer time. So probably the biggest, I guess, as far as my experience with the Boise School District is, in fact, serving as a Boise School District trustee, and I was appointed about 1.5 years ago. And I think probably that is, to answer your second question, what in my background qualifies me or lends itself well to this position would be the very experience in being a trustee for that 1.5 years, where I had an opportunity to serve with the board and oversee $300 million plus budget, help manage COVID, and really deal with all the things that a school board trustee would wrestle with in serving. So that's my background in a nutshell. Again, I'm Boise native. After I graduated from Boise High, I went on to University of Denver, graduated with a political science major, then went to University of Idaho College of Law, and spent a bulk of my career as an attorney, where I practice natural resources law. Great to be here. Thanks.
Neil. Neil, you're on mute.
I'm Neil Mercer. I recently retired from the Air Force out of Mountain Home Air Force Base. My father's side of the family is from the Idaho area, be it Emmett and Meridian. My grandparents got married down in Mountain Home, where I was stationed. So I've been through Idaho quite a bit. What prepares me for the role of school board trustee is serving as an officer in the Air Force. I've done multiple tasks, like $1 million worth of equipment and personnel being deployed one place to the other as a officer in charge of the mobility of our unit, to include other jobs. You get a different job each year in the Air Force as a ground job on top of the flying the jet itself. So all those things help prepare me. It also instilled the Air Force core values in me. So things like service before self and integrity and all you do is a big component of who I am. Having retired, I now have 2 children here in the Boise School District. Part of the reason why we decided to settle down here, on top of the fact that, Idaho's a pretty great place to begin with, was the schools that are available to my children here. And so we settled down here in part because of that, and just kind of seeing how the school board is, I decided to go ahead and throw my hat into the ring, as I think that there are some better ideas that we can implement in order to help the schools perform better, and ultimately our children perform better is what we're really looking for.
Matthew.
Good morning, Matthew Shapiro. I've been a Boise resident for almost 30 years. I have a student in Boise schools, and I have the unique distinction of having worked in education extensively. I started as a paraprofessional in Boise schools in the early 2000s, became a special ed assistant at 2 local junior highs, got my bachelor's in elementary education, started a inclusive and innovative charter school in Garden City in the early 2000s, where I taught the middle school group all subjects, and also served on the board of that school, that public charter school, both before and after my service as a teacher. So I became very familiar with Idaho education rules and laws. After that, I was allowed to go directly into the doctoral program in curriculum and instruction at Boise State University, where I focused on the culture of schooling and education systems, something I've been interested in for a very long time. I think between that background and my longtime focus on participatory design, which is about engaging the broader public in designing education and understanding education, my knowledge of participatory processes just as a community advocate, and my focus on civics education, which I can talk about a bit later. Those are the things that I think make me an outstanding candidate for school board at this time.
Okay, thank you all. And let's dive into some questions now. And I'll mix up the order so each of you will start, and we'll start this first question with you, Neil, and then go to Matthew, and then go to Andy. What do you think is the top priority facing the Boise School District, and how would you address it?
Well, I think one of the top priorities facing the school district right now should be focusing on getting the teachers what they need in the classroom. We have declining enrollment in the Boise School District, which is going to lead to needing to look at the funds that are spent and used a little bit more closely and make sure that they're going to where they need to be going.
Matthew?
Yeah, so in terms of immediate challenges, we have the 1,300 students that have been lost over 2 years, declining enrollment, which the district has started to try to address. There are some factors perhaps beyond its control because it's a complex systemic issue related to COVID, related to housing affordability and all those things, some of which we can affect, some of which we can't directly. Teacher staffing shortages, another factor. We need to do the most we can to make sure that professionals have the support they need in their schools, the competitive salaries, better relationships with the universities, with new teachers. I mean, ensuring we have that pipeline, if you will, of new teachers that can come into the district, and there have been a lot of retirements as well. And the third thing I'd say is student mental health has become it's been talked about a lot as an issue, whether it's new or not, we'll see. But I think there's a lot we can do in terms of school culture to make sure that kids have the fundamental things that they need: belonging, significance, a sense of self-determination and effectiveness, and equipping students, families, and staff with the tools and the curriculum needed to support that social aspect of schooling. It'd be very important. And then, of course, is what I consider a long way to go in terms of civics education. I think it's very superficial right now, and I would like to lead from the board level a comprehensive design process for a new civics program, K-12. So that's a priority.
Andy?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. there's a lot of challenges, and I think about everything's a priority when we're talking Boise School District or public schools in general, whether it's teachers, additional funding. But my top priority would be to improve stakeholder input. As a result of the COVID and the pandemic, there was a bit of a disconnect with some of the stakeholders because of the challenges of COVID. And as a role as a Boise School District trustee is to gauge or understand the community needs and wants, and then marry that with the community resources. And so it's critical to understand the community needs, and that dovetails into our strategic plan that talks about engaging the community so they have an understanding of what we do and understanding what the community's needs are. So because of the challenges of COVID, my top priority would be to improve stakeholder input. As most may know, earlier this year, I guess just a meeting ago, we approved a student advisory committee for the board, and that was a result of a 7-month process to look at improving engagements with students. And so I think that's a good precedence to look at other ways or other methods to improve stakeholder input. So my top priority would be to continue and to improve stakeholder input as if I'm allowed and have the honor of continuing my term as trustee. Thanks.
Matthew, I'm going to start this one with you and then go to Andy and Neil. I want to talk about pandemic protocols and how you would approach those issues going forward. This is less of a question about how did Boise do over the past 2 years, but how would you approach the situation if it were to arise in your time as a trustee? If science said we're in the middle of a spike, if science suggested that more protocols needed to be brought back into place, how would you approach that situation were to come up?
Sure. Well, I think health comes first, public health, student health comes first. So getting that input from public health professionals is the starting point. Two is exploring the range of options we have for minimizing risk. So such as masking, not masking, hybrid alternatives that the district did employ, choice to the extent that it's possible, engaging the school community, parents and staff effectively to understand the facts and the risks. And then ultimately, the decision is the responsibility of the board to make that call as to what to implement. You didn't want to touch on the past decisions. I think they were well made, and we have to continue to be nimble in looking at what the surges are, what the risks are, what we can do to balance all the factors, and as well as reluctance to observing my own student. I think my own students seem to adapt well to masking, and I think that was true of a lot of her classmates. So I think the resilience is there. I think resilience is a little less there, perhaps on the parent side, but all voices have to be respected, and at least everyone has to understand the reasons why we're doing what we do.
Andy.
Yeah, thank you very much. So last night we considered and adopted the continuation of the Boise School District's health and safety plan, which was a continuation of last year's plan that was adopted in March. And so that plan contemplates how do we address the rise of COVID or any communicable or spreadable disease. And it's a great plan. It's a result of a lot of work, a lot of stakeholder input. And so I would look to the health and safety plan to be our guidance on how we move forward in addressing and dealing with COVID or any other disease. Just as a reminder, what that plan does is it looks at various factors to determine what mitigation measures would be appropriate. And those factors would include what is the rate of community transmission, what do our health professionals say, and also looks at considers the status of the healthcare system. So based on that, depending on the spread, and then the other factor is, of course, what are the absences that that the school district is facing in terms of students and staff as well. And then that health and safety plan has a whole list of mitigation measures or tools that can be considered depending on the severity of the spread of COVID or any other disease. And so we'd consider that, and out of this plan, which incorporates some interests that were identified in an endemic committee that was put together, that looks at, okay, which mitigation measures are appropriate, and some of those interests that are incorporated in the plan that was put together by this endemic committee, which was comprised of parents, students, teachers, and staff, considers, what is the least restrictive way to deal with mitigation-wise to appropriately address the effects of COVID. What's the impact on the families? But it also sets forth, we've got to be clear in what our strategies are for that. And then also we've got to be laser focused and have the ability to pivot. So long and the short of it is, I'm totally satisfied with our health and safety plan that we have in place. We've got a good system. The patrons and parents, that is, parents seem to like it. We had a survey that was out there, had 600 plus responses that looked at this exact same plan, and they overwhelmingly liked the plan and they wanted to continue. So that's why last night I approved of the plan, and our plan is to follow the health and safety plan, and I have total confidence in that plan. And so that's how I would recommend, that's how we're going to address it going forward. Thanks.
Neil.
Well, I'd say not talking about the past, at least now using the past as a measure, we have more information at least on what COVID is, how it affects people, and what we can expect out of it, and then the results of different measures that we use now. So we're in a position now where we can make a more informed decision about any policies that get put in place. So we at least have that going for us, and we can see what the measures that we've done or instituted have done to our children. So like sending kids home for, a year and a half, 2 years, we can see how they are now performing in school versus the people or the districts who chose not to homeschool kids or do virtual learning. So we can see those differences as well. So there's a whole lot of new metrics that we have that we can look at and lean on going forward. My default answer is usually, let's see what the plan says, and then we can deviate from there, right? So we have that health plan, and then depending on the different scenarios that come up, you can adjust from there. There's also the opportunities to do both in school and virtual, so that for the high risk people who are worried about it and have reason to, everybody has reason to worry, but the people who are especially at risk can do potentially online while everybody else goes in school still. And I guess the benefits of being in that group and being able to speak directly with the teachers.
Andy, I'm going to start this question with you. So much of what so much of what you can do as a Boise trustee is dependent on what happens at the legislature and what the legislature does. So give me a sense of where you feel like the legislature is doing a good job of supporting education, and where do you think they've come up short? So I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Neil and Matthew on that one.
Yeah, great question. So As we know this year, funding, we had increased funding this year from the state legislature. We had a surplus, and so we're seeing more dollars coming in from the state. I think the state did a good job also during the COVID and providing aid and funding as we dealt with COVID and some of the effects. And we got really good support from the state. And I think the greatest challenge, though, is fundamentally, where do we go from here? We've had some momentum on funding. The state has been a good partner in dealing with COVID, and so I think the biggest challenge is how do we build off of that? How do we move forward? And we've got good relationships with the state. We've got a legislative committee that we deal with legislators. We're an active member of the Idaho School Board Association. One of our board members, Nancy Gregory, is the president or incoming president of the Idaho School Board Association. So we've got a good channel. We've got good relations, and I think the biggest drawback with the state is in some cases there's been some communication gaps and some challenges there. But I think that the key in that is to continue to build those relationships to overcome some of those communication gaps and challenges that really resulted in some perhaps misunderstandings on what we do and what schools do in the state. Thanks.
Neil.
Yeah, I think I agree mostly with that statement, to be honest. I think that the legislature and the state of Idaho in general is doing a pretty decent job of working with the schools, giving the schools the funding that they need to operate and be successful. There's areas where improvements can always be made. You can always find something, but overall, not disappointed.
Matthew.
Yeah, so we have to make sure that long-term funding is increased so that, momentary surpluses, we can't rely on those for long-term sustainability. So I think making education funding a higher priority in the legislature is an ongoing process. I think the legislature should stop waging ideological battles on education. And the third thing I would say is major decisions about the direction of curriculum should probably come from the bottom up and not from the legislature. So, for example, this year, the legislature decided to sorry, I think my video just popped in and out. Regardless of the merits of Common Core, there's in education, if you study the history of education reform, you see these swings, pendulum swings. Things get introduced to a new thing, and then politically there's an attack on it from usually some special interest group. There is not support for it because education isn't really a grassroots movement, and then it gets shot down for political reasons rather than practical reasons. And educators, those are three areas where I think legislature can improve its support for education.
We'll get to ideology here in a second, but I want to stick with one decision that the legislature made that affected a decision that Boise made, the move to all-day kindergarten. I want to get a sense from Neil, then Matthew, and Andy. Do you support the move to all-day kindergarten in the Boise schools? And going forward, how would you measure whether the program is successful or not?
I do support all-day kindergarten for a few reasons. The least of which is, there's working parents, especially in today's economy with the, rising inflation. There's more and more parents who need to be at work for a little bit longer, or they need to go from a single income household to a dual income household. So it helps with that. But more importantly, is the fact that study after study has shown that early education increases the successfulness of the child once they leave the education system as a whole. So like once they graduate high school, the kids who started earlier in kindergarten have higher test scores and higher success rates after leaving high school. So I'm for kindergarten, and all day kindergarten. I think is a good day, and it's a good way for kids to start.
Matthew.
Yes, I support all day kindergarten for the reasons of parental support. I think it works better for working families. I think kids are at that age perfectly ready and I think it does certainly contribute to success later on. I would like to see I don't want to see kindergarten be just a prep school for first grade, in the sense of, the original, the meaning of the word kindergarten means children's garden, and it was intended developmentally to be a time when kids could play and engage creatively with each other, with arts, with nature. I would like to see a lot of that. If we're going to have the opportunity to have kids in an educational environment early on, I think we should really think about what it should be for and how we should operate it. So I bring to the table a lot of background in different models of education, and would love to pose questions like this to the community. So I think it's an important design question.
Andy.
Thank you. I support full day kindergarten, absolutely. And that was reflected in my support and vote by the board where we adopted full day kindergarten. And I think it was definitely due within the Boise School District. Some people, probably most people, know that Boise School District did provide full day kindergarten, but that was only it wasn't in all schools. And depending on your background and where you lived, you didn't necessarily have that access, or you may had, or you had it paid, or you had to pay for full day kindergarten. So to take a step back and to implement full day kindergarten for everyone free of charge was a big win for the Boise School District. And part of that decision, in my mind, in supporting it was a few things. One is the success statistically that you see of students that have the benefit of full day kindergarten. That's not in dispute. And also how kindergarten has been successful throughout the state. As understand, we were in the minority, Boise School District, in offering full day kindergarten. Majority of districts in the state of Idaho offer full day kindergarten. So how do you measure that? I think, again, statistics would be a way to measure the effect of, or the impact of full day kindergarten before and then after, probably look back. But I think part of it is to have a discussion over the next few years, in particular with our first grade teachers. I think really full day kindergarten's awesome for our kindergartners, but really the impact starts right away in first grade. So I think having a comprehensive look back discussion with our first grade teachers to see what's the impact, and to really assess how ready, or more ready, I guess, these kids are in first grade as they move through their journey in elementary school and beyond.
Matthew, there's been a lot of talk about the teacher shortage, statewide and even nationally. I want to start this question with you, and then we'll go to Andy and Neil. What is the one thing you feel like the Boise School Board can do tangibly to support educators?
Well, I've having gone through the educational leadership program at Boise State, I'm very big believer in the importance of school culture and both certified and non-certified staff feeling fully supported professionally and personally. I'm not saying that isn't done, but just ensuring that we are doing all we can in every school at every level in that way. And also, there's always a public and parental dimension to it, sort of the perception that there's a perception that a lack of respect perhaps for the education profession that is affecting morale, it is said. So to address that issue and so many others, I think it's really important to ramp up parents' understanding of what educators actually do, putting themselves in their shoes, making it less of a black box. I would like to see school councils created. So we already have some PTAs, but a school council would be an ongoing forum for dialogue between parents, teachers, students on any issue or concern. And it would be a real, I think, step up in terms of engagement to help increase that support and understand the way that educators feel, but also parents and the others. It would affect so many issues that are controversial as well as routine. So,
Andy.
Thank you. Boise School District has a strategic plan, and part of that plan is to not only set forth the goals, objectives, strategies on hiring the best and brightest, but also to retain our teachers who are the best and brightest, no doubt. So the key is how do we help our educators? And the key, which is actually set forth in the strategic plan, is to solicit input and feedback, so we understand the issues, concerns, or resources perhaps that teachers or educators need, or ideas that can make our educational system better. And in turn, also, I guess, provide the tools and resources that allows educators to perform to the best of their ability. So input, feedback, and provide tools and resources so they can go out and do what they do best. Thanks.
Neil.
So when you first said tangible, I was kind of thinking, pays, right? Because that's something that everybody can see and everybody can do. But pay is not why people do a lot of their jobs. Like same thing with the military. You can pay somebody a whole bunch, but if you're treating them poorly or you're not trust them like you should, they're going to walk out, and that's just how it is. There's a pilot shortage in the Air Force right now for that same reason. Then they keep up in the pay, but people keep walking because it's not all about pay, and that's an important thing to note. That being said, everybody should be paid fairly for the services that they provide, right? Because they provide a value for us, and it's a great value to the community that they give us. So pay should be a part of the equation, but it's maybe not as high up as people would think on the tangible side. So a lot of it, I believe, is kind of those intangibles, like teacher morale, like what are they feeling? I think the best way to go about that is to speak directly with them and find out what it is that are their concerns. What are they feeling is something that would benefit them. I think there's these days potentially a lot of second guessing of teachers, and we leave our kids in their hands for hours on end every day, and we need to have faith that they're doing what they should. I'm one of those people who just assume good intent out of people, and I believe that we should just assume good intent out of our teachers, and we should give them the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the right thing for our kids. Obviously, it goes back to the old Reagan trust but verify, right? So you need to have some kind of metric in there to make sure that things are going as they should. But if we give them the support that they need and ask for, I think a lot of stuff can manage its own at that point, and just making sure that that the care and feeding of the system is healthy.
Okay. Let's talk ideology a little bit. Andy, I'm going to start this one with you and then go to Neil and Matthew. So much of the debate about education nationally and even at the state and local level has surrounded terms such as critical race theory and indoctrination. And the Boise School District was subject to a public records request on this topic about a year ago. Are there valid concerns here in your view?
No, there isn't, Kevin. We in Boise School District did not have critical race theory or any sort of indoctrination part of the curriculum. That said, if there are in fact any concerns that a parent has or a guardian has, whatever that may be, we have policies in place where a parent can ask, for example, if it's material, if there's some material that's a concern for a parent or guardian, that parent can have a conversation with the principal, and there's a process where the student would not have to have that material, and there'd be other methods, material that could be provided. There's also policies that are embedded within the Boise School District that deal with, if there's an objection on, concern over curriculum overall, materials overall, where there's a committee that can be formed and ultimately a process that would ultimately come to the board. So no concerns whatsoever with critical race theory. But if there are concerns, there are policies in place where parents or guardians can pursue if there are concerns on the material that we're providing in our curriculum.
Yeah.
Currently, I'd say no concerns about how things are right now. I do believe that the policies that are in place should be adequate to deal with things like that, such as, in Napa, I think we all know about the situation there with them, essentially banning, 22 books, something like that. There's a policy in place in the Boise School Districts that allows for parents to raise concerns and be able to bring those forward and have them handled that way. I don't think that we should just outright say that parents don't have concerns. I think there are a lot of concerns over these because people see what's happening around the country, and they kind of wonder if that's happening in their school district. And I think that's a good thing. I think parents being involved, bringing parents in, is a great thing because it gets them involved with the process. We get their input and are able to make decisions, based off of what the end user, the parent, wants for their child, and for us to provide the best education that we can. I think there is definitely worry. It's that whole slippery slope argument of, hey, well, West Ada just bought a curriculum for $125,000 for CRT. So, saying it's not in Idaho is no longer an argument that someone can make. But again, we do have procedures in place that would allow that to be reviewed, and I'd go with that, and then from there we can change to the situation or make decisions as the situation dictates.
Okay, Matthew.
Well, Kevin, you asked if the concerns are valid. So I think it's wisest to adopt the policy that all concerns are valid, first off, then figure out how to address those through openness and transparency and invitation. That concept of building bridges so that the broader community and parents can understand what is being taught, what is not being taught. And then in the area of how we address things like racism, we can't ignore that. There are issues in our society that our students see and need to learn about and need to be equipped to talk about. And I think that's the key, is figuring out how to talk about things without, I think people are, without influencing kids in one direction or the other. I have a book from 1940 called, it's like a case book of civics in our high schools. And that in that book, it says students should be taught how to think, not what to think. Well, that was 1940. And today, that is still considered to be the way to go. And it's just a matter of how do you do that and how do you demonstrate that that is what's happening. And that ties back to civics education and the need for building our capacity, both within the schools and around the schools, to talk about issues and in an empowering manner. And so that's the tough part of it.
Neil, you teed up the next question I had, and we only have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to get back to it. You mentioned NAMPA and their decision to ban 22 books from library shelves. I want to start with you, and then we'll go to Matthew and Andy. Can you envision a scenario as a trustee where you would make a similar decision about removing books from shelves?
Well, a similar decision to NAMPA, no, because the way they went about it was kind of, not in line with their own policies. From what I understand, policies of the Boise School District are that if a parent has a concern, they bring it up with the school, and then a committee is formed with, involving teacher, parents, and the principal. And then based on that decision, the parent can then appeal that decision up to the board. So the way they did the process, no. And generally speaking, as just my own philosophy, banning books is not a good idea. That being said, there is the line of what's appropriate, right? So I'm not gonna want to see a Playboy in the library at the elementary school, right? So if that were brought in, then I think we have a very good discussion about banning that material, right? I don't think people are going to bring that in, so I'm not so worried about that discussion. So there's that line of what's appropriate for that age. Generally speaking, I'm very against banning books, but I can see a scenario where something that is inappropriate for children or for that specific grade level, even so, maybe not, maybe in the elementary school, but not in the high school kind of thing. And that's a broader discussion that we'd have with the community. But I'd say it'd have to go through the process of being brought to the attention via the process I mentioned earlier. But yes, generally as a general philosophy, banning books is bad, but that doesn't mean that there's no instance where a book might not be banned.
Okay. Matthew.
So I start from the standpoint that our school librarians are they are professionals and they understand their responsibilities in terms of what material is out there. I also think it's naive to think that that our kids aren't hearing about things outside of their school libraries through their friends, through social media. And so I think the idea that they're being exposed to things that are going to damage them is a little bit naive. Are there materials out there that really should not be? Possibly. So those should be identified, and that should begin with the school librarians and then through the administration. And where there are controversies, I think, again, this concept of school councils, where students and teachers and parents can talk about what is of concern, what should be there, what should not be there, and then perhaps before it gets raised to a district level and the question of removing things wholesale might be a good step. That's a lot more participatory and, again, educational for the entire community to go through that type of process. So I'm a big advocate of participatory ways of addressing things.
Andy, last word to you.
Thank you very much. Again, thanks for hosting. So no concern that we will go down the path what Nampa did, because we have a different system. The system has policies in place that provide for if individuals have concerns on an individual book, parent or guardian, there's a process to have that book removed for the purpose of that class for that individual. There's also a process in place where if parents or guardians have concerns over a book that's being or material for district wide, a process to follow. And all of that process involves input by principals, teachers, parents, and ultimately a process that leads back to the board. So I have no concerns because we have a separate process that's in place. And so where Nampa's decision was a unilateral decision by the board without having the benefit of such policy. So I do not foresee Boise going down that same path at all. Thank you.
I want to thank all three of you for joining us here today for this virtual forum. Andy Hawes, Neil Mercer, Matthew Shapiro. And I want to thank all three of you as well for responding to our written questionnaires. We covered a lot of ground there, topics we didn't get to in this forum. So if you want more information from these three candidates, please go to idahoednews.org. You can read these candidates' responses in their own words. Again, this is race number 2 in the Boise School District. These three candidates are vying for 1 4-year term on the board. The election is September 6th. If you watched all the way through, I suspect you're fixing to vote anyway, but we would encourage you to vote and make your voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.